Welcome to another video on my channel. If you want to know who I am and what my channel is about, please forward to the end of the video where I have a short summary of what I do and what my channel is about. Also, this video is about English literature and it's part 2, so if you haven't watched part 1, I would recommend that you go and watch it right now. It's in the top right corner and in the description box below. So, besides all of that, let's now start part 2. Number 1. Literature textbooks are very important. Here are two of the ones which I have. One of them is the new one, the 9-to-1 curriculum one, and the other is the old textbook. Now this is the old textbook which I'm showing you here. I didn't show the new one because I felt that there are some things in the old textbook which most people tend to miss out because they look to the new textbook now. So here are some things such as responding to unseen poems and preparation for exams, which are very important and they're available at the end of the book. There's also some stuff in the beginning of the book, as you can see over here. There's also some stuff about the assessment objectives, but don't rely on these assessment objectives because the specification has now changed. But you can always take tips of other things such as analysis and how to structure your answer and everything, such as over here at the back there are some tips on how to plan your answer, and I'm going to come to that later on in the video. Next thing that you should definitely do is to annotate or take notes in your textbook, which is what I did, and I did it during class while the teacher was explaining, which is very useful because you get to write all the important things about each line of the poem at that moment, and it's better than going home and then writing the notes because by that time you might have forgotten some stuff. Oh, and also in the old textbook as well as the new textbook, annotations are made already with the key on the side as to what those annotations mean, so I didn't have to annotate by myself. Also, if you don't have space for writing notes on the textbook, you can add sticky notes on the textbook, as I've done over here for some poems. My point is basically that whatever way you do it, you must write notes during class because it helps a lot later on when you go through the poems, because then simultaneously you can look at the notes and the analysis of the poems at the same time, which will help you to remember it more clearly. Oh, also, the anthology is a good book for testing yourself. It's not really a textbook because it just has plain texts and poems. There's no information on themes or author's background, etc. As you can see over here, paper 1 section A poetry, all the poems are included which are part of the new specification. And yeah, so if you have only the anthology, then you should annotate the anthology by yourself, but if you have a normal textbook like I do, then that's fine, you don't need to annotate by yourself. Now, when I said you can use it for testing, that's because you can use the anthology to cover up your textbook like that, and then ask yourself, stuff about the poem, literary devices, etc., and see if you remember. If you don't, go back to the textbook and learn all the important related stuff. Also, all the links to ordering the textbooks are down below in the description box. Now, this isn't really a tip, but if you don't have a textbook or you don't want to write in your textbook, just write notes in a separate book. But whatever happens, you must write notes. Moving on, this is one of the most important tips for literature. You must write using the P.E.E. format for your answers. And this is over here a view of the old textbook which I showed you earlier, and it mentions how you should structure your answer. I couldn't find a place like this in the new book, but I'm sure it must be there. It's just that I couldn't find it, so I decided to show you a snippet from the old book. And it mentions that your answer should have an introduction, a main section, and a conclusion. And then it says that in the main section there should be a clear point, evidence, and explanation structure for each paragraph, which is called the P.E.E. format. Now first, let me tell you how your introduction should be. It should be concise, it should answer the question immediately, and it should summarize what you're going to say later on in the main section. I won't go into too much detail about the introduction or the conclusion because I'm going to make a separate video later on about how to write a perfect essay, including the intro and conclusion. So for now, I'm going to focus on the main section and how to use P.E.E. So the main section should be structured into paragraphs. That's what examiners like. They won't like it if you write in points, obviously. It has to be in paragraphs. Then number 2, each paragraph must represent one point. A point is like your opinion or your answer to the question. It has to be linked to the question. It can't be a random point. And each paragraph must follow P.E.E., which means that each paragraph in the main section must follow the P.E.E. format. Now let's come to the P.E.E. format. What is it? I'm sure that most people must have heard of this. So P stands for point, E stands for evidence, and then the second E stands for explanation. Now let's take the example of Macbeth. For example, you start a paragraph, and as I said, each paragraph should represent one point. So for example, my point is that Lady Macbeth sleepwalking represents her guilt. Now that's the point that I'm making in response to the question. I have to give evidence for that. So evidence would be a quote from the text or any other sort of evidence, and then I would have to explain it. So I would have to explain how the evidence confirms my point and how both my point and my evidence are linked to the question, and whether or not it makes sense in relation to the question is very important. You should not add a random point that does not link to the question at all, which is like completely absurd, because examiners won't give you marks for random points. The points have to be in relation to the question, and if they're valid and you have good evidence for them, then you're going to score marks. Otherwise, you're not. Then obviously after the main section you have the conclusion, which also has to be concise. It has to reinstate what your main point or answer was to the question, and you should use phrases like I believe, I feel, I think to show that this is your opinion, which is what most examiners appreciate. Next, you should definitely try to make mind maps for characters, themes, etc. because I feel it helps you to remember information, but it depends upon the person. If you don't find mind maps useful, then you don't have to make them. You can always substitute them with flashcards or any other kind of resource which suits you. Over here, I'm just making a mind map for Inspector Gould from An Inspector Calls, and I used a video of Mr. Bruff. I mentioned him in my previous video in part 1. Next, you should always try to take out time to analyze random unseen poems, as I'm doing right now. This was a video from quite a few days ago, and I'm just analyzing a poem from a past paper. You can also take any random poem and then check the analysis of it from a website to see how you did, or look at the mark scheme, etc. Then you should also read as many books as you can, because reading books helps you to increase your comprehension capabilities as well as your focus, and it helps you to build your vocabulary, and you'll learn to focus more on different details. It also helps to relieve stress. So you should definitely try to read books, and they don't have to be, non-fiction. They can be fiction as well. Reading anything in general just helps quite a lot. If you're wondering who I am, then let me go ahead and tell you. I study in a school in the UAE and I received a scholarship. Also, I received many certificates of merit throughout the years, alhamdulillah. And the school where I study is very good in terms of education, because many students have graduated from their O-levels with amazing marks, some of them even getting the highest marks in the world. I also write short stories in my free time, and I love to read. Additionally, I'm a photographer on unsplash.com, the link is below, and I happen to be a beginner Apple Swift coder. I took my course from Treehouse, the link for that is also below. Thanks for watching my video, and I hope you subscribe for more videos like this one.